to the Mountain View Wisconsin School District regular meeting to order. Could I, well, let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and the students from Therakoff Elementary will lead us. Whenever you're ready. Yeah, okay, thank you very much. We'll have a roll call.
Devin Conley.
Anna Reed.
Charles DeFazio.
Bill Lambert and trustee Lisa Henry will be joining us in a few minutes. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Do any of the trustees have any questions or comments on the agenda? Any member of the public wish to speak on the agenda, either in person or online? I don't see anyone. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion by trustee DeFazio, a second by trustee Conley, that the agenda be approved as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Next, we will have the school showcase from Therakoff Elementary.
Good evening, trustees. Thank you so much for having us here. And thank you to the parents who brought some of our Therakoff cheetahs as well. And thank you to all the district office here for us today. There's nothing more exciting than showcasing Therakoff School and all the hard work that we've been working on. But what's more important to us is student voice. So you'll be hearing from our students today about a couple of different things that they've been working extremely hard on and that they have a voice in. And you'll hear from our wonderful teachers as well, who help support them through their learning journey. So with further ado, we have Miss Gallagher, second grade teacher.
There we go. Got to move it up pretty high. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Miss Gallagher. I'm excited to tell you about our second grade to third grade gardening project that we have started this year. This year, our class is learning all about how plants grow and how we can take care of our earth. Our gardening project connects to our Amplify science units. In Cycles of Nature, we learn about patterns in weather and seasons and how plants change over time. In insects, we study pollinators and how insects help plants grow. In the human body, we learn about nutrition and how plants give us the food and energy we need. All of these units help us understand why plants are important and how everything in nature is connected. In second grade, we focus on building background knowledge, talking about our learning, and doing lots of hands-on experiences. Gardening lets us do all three. We get to plant seeds, observe changes, collect data, and share our thinking with our class. Hands-on gardening was really meaningful for me when I was in elementary school, and it made learning come alive in a way I never forgot. I hope this project gives my students that same lasting experience, something they will remember, feel proud of, and carry with them after second grade. At the end of the year, we will put on a garden show to share everything we learned. We will sing, act, and celebrate our hard work in science and in our garden, something that these third graders right here got to do last year. We're excited to keep learning, growing, and taking care of our school garden together. And then I'd like to bring forward my student Goro to share more.
Hi, everyone. My name is Goro, and I want to tell you what we did at our family seed meeting and what we have learned about in class. We shared the information we learned about seeds with our parents. We explained that seeds need water, space, and sunlight to grow, and that they grow better with sun and soil. We also taught how seeds can be small or big, and how they travel by wind, water, and mammals. At the meeting, we got delicious food from the farmer's market, and we worked together to pull weeds around our school to help our garden space stay healthy. It was really fun to teach our families and take care of our campus.
Hello, my name is Miss Meyer, and I'm a third grade teacher at Therakoff. As Miss Gallagher has mentioned, we have created a sustainability project that spans across the second and third grade classes at Therakoff. Our third grade students are building learning experiences from what they learned in second grade. As the second graders showcase for us, students in third grade are revisiting seeds, soil, and life cycles. Our main goal for our sustainability project in third grade is to connect this information to our third grade math standards of measurement and data. Students will be learning about seeds, growing veggies in our garden, and tracking plant growth. Students will become sustainable farmers by reflecting on their data and learning strategies for how to best grow their vegetables in their garden. Not only does this allow students to gain the hands-on cross-curricular experiences, but it also supports them in developing responsibility. And we have a privilege of also collaborating with partners in the Mountain View community, such as farmers and businesses, to support students' understanding of where food comes from and what healthy eating looks like, which we've also connected to our Amplified curriculum. We are grateful towards the local farmers and businesses as they donated produce towards our recent seeds meeting with families. During the seeds meeting, our students were able to showcase what they learned, and they are going to show you what they got to teach their parents right now. I'm going to welcome up Millen, Shiv, and Logan. Come on up, please.
Hi, I'm Millen from Miss Meyer's class.
Next slide, sorry. Yeah,
I'm in third grade from the Seeds class. Shiv. My name is Logan and I am from Miss Meyer's class. So I am going to teach you about the parts of a seed. There are 4 parts of a seed. First is the seed coat, which protects the seed. Then the food store, which has nutrients. Next is the first leaf. Finally, there is the embryo. These parts are the first parts of the plant that begins to grow. We discovered that seeds are small parts of a plant that are used to grow a new plant. We also measured seeds and noticed that seeds come in all different shapes and sizes. We discovered that seeds are dormant and sleeping until water wakes them. There are 4 important things seeds need in order to grow. First, they need sunlight. Second, they need air, which includes elements like oxygen and carbon dioxide. Third, seeds need plenty of water to help them sprout and stay healthy. The reason they need a lot of water is because it wakes the seed up from their dormant state and begins the germination process. Finally, healthy soil that includes minerals and compost provides nutrients for the seed to grow. Seeds need also water to wake up from the dormant state. When they wake up, they begin to germination. That means the plant begins to grow from a seed. We go to teachers to our families the seeds meeting learning around delicious fruits and vegetables. It also helps the weeds up in the ground to give our seeds the space they need to grow.
Good evening. My name is Jen Stewart, and I'm a fifth grade teacher at Therakoff. I'm proud to introduce Expect Respect, our 4th and 5th grade student leadership team. At Therakoff, we believe student leadership is essential. When students are empowered to take ownership of their school community, they develop confidence, communication skills, and a strong sense of belonging. This year, our Expect Respect team has taken the initiative to create and lead several new lunch clubs. These clubs not only enrich the lunchtime experience, but also ensure that every student has a place to connect, explore interests, and feel included. We're excited for you to hear directly from our student leaders about the impact their work is having across their school. I'd love to introduce Evelyn, Amelia, Avery. Come on up.
Hi, Evelyn. And I'm Amelia. And I'm Avery. For the Kindness Club, our main goal is to help spread kindness through words and actions. And we create a positive and inclusive classroom and school environment. And we also like to make new friends and play kindness games. So the Kindness Club is really gonna try to help like make new friends that can like stay for a long time. For Mr. Slime Club, we want to learn about chemical reactions and practice measuring, mixing, and following directions carefully. Also, we want to express creativity through colors, scents, and textures and work safely and collaboratively in a group.
And now our Expect Respect students will share about the Celebration Sash Sensation at Faircloth, which is a fun and meaningful way for classes to earn pins every month. They're all wearing one sash right now.
So in the Celebration Sash Sensation, we have each class have the opportunity to earn pins, and every month we have a new core value pin. We like celebrating our achievements, and our favorite one. And our favorite one is the kindness pin, because we earned it, because we were doing well in our class. And we'd also like to note that 5th grade has got the attendance pin for all 4 months.
All right, sweeties, let's come on up, and we're gonna end with our Faircloth song. So some of you got to hear it last year. Feel free to tap along with us as we sing. All right.
We are kids of Faircloth, we're proud of the young and blue. We grow our strength because our teachers are tough and we follow core values too. We're first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, KTK. We have big cheetahs and we work towards our goal. You're here on all the way. Yay!
Well, clear everyone out. Okay, before we move on to the next item, I'd like to report that trustee Henry has been able to join us. So item 3, this is the opportunity for members of the public to address the board concerning items on the closed session agenda. Do any members of the public wish to speak on closed session agenda items? I do not see anyone in person. Is there anyone online who wishes to speak? I do not see anyone. So with that, we will close open session and move on to closed session. Okay, the Board of Trustees will return to open session at 7:37 PM. No reportable action was taken during closed session. We'll move to the consent agenda. Do any of the trustees have any questions concerning the consent agenda? I do not see any. Any member of the public wish to speak on the consent agenda? I do not see anyone in person, and I do not see anyone online. A motion to approve the consent agenda? Or comments?
So moved.
Just like to comment that I liked seeing the extra detail in the meeting minutes for people who spoke. But I second.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second? We have a motion by trustee Conley and a second by trustee Reed that the board approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. And we will move on to communications. Are there any employee organizations who wish to speak tonight? I do not see any. Are there any district committees who would like to speak? Trustee DeFazio?
Yes, the Health and Wellness Committee met on Tuesday, November 18th, where we reviewed the progress report that we kind of approved in the consent agenda. And then we were working on one of our annual goals around nutrition promotion and collecting community food resources, and kind of how we're going to communicate that through the district.
Okay, thank you. Any other district committees? Trustee Conley?
The District English Language Advisory Committee also met recently. I believe it was Monday. And it was one of the longer meetings. It also included a budget discussion as well.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent Bear?
Yes, a few items. First, music honors. Among our Graham choir students, 6 were selected for the CMEA Bay section honor choir, and 5 were accepted to the California All-State Junior High honor choir. We also had 2 orchestra students that will be representing Graham at the CMEA Honor Orchestra at San Jose State. So very proud of our talented musicians. Our district came together to celebrate diversity, build connections, and stand united against bias and injustice as part of our United Against Hate Week. Our school celebrated with spirit weeks, multicultural potlucks, assemblies, canned food drives, Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day, and other activities, creating meaningful opportunities for students, families, and staff to discuss what it means to stand united against hate. So I was glad to see that. Want to report to the board that as of late this afternoon, we received that escrow closed, and we received just over $54 million from Foothill De Anza Community College District, closing that deal at the workforce housing project at the Sevens. So I think that's probably the last thing we have to report on that particular project. So thanks again to Dr. Westover. For staying focused on that. We know it was a long road. Appreciate your guidance and setting up expectations, and really pleased that we're able to follow through with that. I think it's really going to prove valuable for the district in many ways, and long into the future. So great news about that. I'm sure Charles will report at some point, but I know the housing board has been meeting, really looking to hit that lower rent for our people living there, and getting that building fully leased up at the start of the new year. So, and finally, I'm saddened to share that former trustee Rose Filicetti passed away last week. You probably heard. Rose served our district from 1994 to 2004, a decade that included a historic merger between Mountain View and Wisman. school boards, as well as the passage of both a bond and a parcel tax. She also went on to lead the Santa Clara County School Boards Association as its executive director. I was proud to say that I was a teacher and principal in the district when Rose was on the school board. She dedicated her life to public service and to uplifting her community. She often spoke with pride about her years in Mountain View, and she truly cherished the time she spent serving our students, staff, and families. And if it's agreeable to all, we'll plan for a resolution and some other activities in her honor at the December 18th meeting um, coming up next month. I know Devon's been in touch with the family and they'll have representation here as well. So I think it would be really a fantastic gesture to recognize Rose and the work she's done. So she will be missed. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 8, discussion and action. First item A is special education update, and Mr. Salvaggio will present.
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to let me present today. Okay. To start with, I wanted to share with you a highlight. I always think it's important to start with good things because I got to talk about some data trends. Yesterday, I had our special education parent advisory meeting, and I was so impressed with the parents we have on that committee. Highly talented people that were solution oriented, and I felt very grateful that that we have all these parent volunteers that are willing to do so much in our community. And I think it's important to recognize when we see that good work being done. So I'm here today to give you an update on some trends that are going on in special education. Before I do that, I want to let you know about some of our administrators besides myself, Jennifer Morgan, Marisol Shively, and I wanted to introduce you formally to Kara Clapper, who's our teacher on special assignment. You want to? Oh, you're the only one in here. Which one could it be? I've got to say to you that Kara's been able to come in and support many of our new teachers this year in special education. And she has far exceeded my expectations, so much so that I've encouraged her, I think it was a nudge, maybe a push to start pursuing her administrative credential because I really see her as a future leader in special education. So thank you for everything that you've done. And I just wanted the board to be able to meet you. Okay, so let's go on to the presentation itself. I want to frame by always mentioning what IDEA is about and what it stands for. Access to a free and appropriate public education, that we're to educate students in the least restrictive environment and accommodate to meet their unique needs and prepare students for a future in education, employment, and independent living. So when we talk about special education, this is what the federal law that translates into state law tells us that we're responsible for in educating our students. So the goal related to the strategic plan, you can read there. I don't need to read it for you. So this aligns to the strategic plan, what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. And we got a little bit of delay. Oh, there we go. Before I talk about data, I want to just make sure that we're talking about kids. They're not widgets. They're wonderful children that are in our schools. This is actually our Graham Extensive Support Needs class. And those students there at their the cafe that they do weekly over there. So we talk about data, but we're really talking about children. And I think not losing sight of that is important. So let's talk about some district data. We remain to have some pockets of overrepresentation, and I think it's important that we continue to try to address this. You can see there that while 39% of our students are considered Hispanic Latino in our community, this year you can see that 56% are Hispanic Latino represented in special education. And I mention that along with this next number because I do think it's critical, if it cooperates, that 70% of our kids in special education are boys and 29.7 are girls. And I just say that because if you look at that previous slide and you look at this slide, you see there's also connections there. And I do believe there's a lot of reasons why this happens, and some of it relates to boys have a tendency to act outwardly and girls more inwardly. And so we notice them a lot better when they're not doing well, you know, when they're maybe acting out to try to learn how to adapt to school. And I think we're under identifying girls because we see girls more act in with their stress. And so I just want to, you know, we need to continue to address this. It's something that really, you know, personally, I think is an issue because it's an equity issue that we need to continue to look at. Let's look at some statewide data. You know, this is not numbers that I look at and feel really proud about. You can see that all our students are about 63% in performance rates, but in ELA, we're 24% for our students with disabilities. And I think we've done some things this year that'll help increase some of those scores, at least that's my hope. But it still worries them, right? This flat rate has been going on for years in our district, and we really have got to do something to address it. And it's the same with math. We're seeing that proficiency rates remaining low. Then you go into chronic absenteeism. I am actually reasonably optimistic about this. We'll see how it ends up. It'll definitely grow probably a little bit. But you can see, I mean, since the pandemic, our chronic absenteeism rates for children with disabilities has been very high. And so I am hoping that we see a decrease in that this year. We also have had an issue with suspensions for kids with disabilities. And, you know, it's only November. So, and I can tell you there's been suspensions going on already because I hear about them all. And that number is going to increase. I hope it does fall below, but we'll just have to wait and see. I want to talk about primary disability trends, and this is really getting into the bulk of what I want to talk about tonight. So we've had a situation happen where we're starting to see kids with more impacted disabilities be a part of our community. And you can see that it's only November again, and already we've seen ourselves go from 141 to 158 kids that have been with a primary disability of autism. That's significant. And then when you add in the fact a number of these kids, a number of these students also have more impacted disabilities that would fit into our more moderate and extensive support needs classes. And so that is what impacts us as far as programming that I'm concerned with. Now you see that little tiny intellectual disability number. We had 2 last year, and now we're at 7. It seems like we only have 7 kids. Keep in mind, extensive support needs class where most of these students end up is 10 kids. So already we've basically created half a class, and it's only November. And then we've had some decreased trends, although it's only November again, but I will tell you that speech and language impairment and specific learning disability have were down last year. And in our resource programs where a lot of these kids end up, those numbers have been lower too this year. So we'll see how that ends up in the end. The other numbers are pretty small numbers, but I will tell you our deaf and hard of hearing number of students, increase of 2. Usually kids require a lot of additional support when they're deaf and hard of hearing. So we need to keep that in mind also. So types of programs. I hope I just didn't skip that slide. So we have different types of programs that we do in the district. You can read them. I do want to mention to you that we've added 2 moderate programs this year. We did add the 2 social resource programs, and we eliminated 2 mild moderate programs at the elementary level and replaced them with learning centers. And so just so you know what's happened this year as well. So our current enrollment in...
You want to just say a word about learning centers?
Oh yeah, learning centers are basically students that are in general education about 80% of their day. Previously we had what were called mild moderate programs, which were more self-contained programs. The worry with that type of programming is California is one of the only states left to do it. And it's a concern because they're very hard classes to be able to try to teach, mainly because putting a lot of kids in there with a lot of struggles, and you're trying to have a teacher try to teach multiple subjects with them. And so what we know, well, at least from my last district that I was in, what we found out is when we created learning centers, we saw state testing scores increase dramatically by being with peers, with being general education peers. And so this is why we wanted to make this transition. And so what we ended up doing is kids that had more mild profiles, in other words, they could intellectually access the education, but maybe their skills were lower, were placed in our more learning center oriented classes, and those that were more impacted in other ways that would more classify as moderate disabilities, they were placed in moderate programs. Does that make sense? So yeah. If you look at what's happened in our programs right now, you can see our moderate right now, we're at 71 kids in our moderate programs, 55 in our extensive support needs classes, and then we have a handful in home hospital. Our learning centers are 56, and our social resource programs, we have 16. So that's the way that plays itself out right now. Again, the left side is where I have the concern because that number just keeps to be. And when I show you the preschool data of what to expect for the following year, you're going to see that's a real issue. So rising trends with students with more extensive needs. Between these 2 years, you can see between November of this year and last year, if you add those two together, we're at 71 students that have moved into the district since that time. And so if you break that down to how it relates to kids in our requiring higher levels of support, meaning moderate and extensive support needs classes, you can see last year 49% of the students that entered in needed higher levels of support. This year so far, it's hard for me to read that sign. Does it say 37? 31%, yeah, sorry, I'm pretty blind. So 31% of the kids that have moved in have needed that type of support. So 42% since last year up to November of this year have needed that kind of support. Keep in mind, it's only November in that blue. And so this is where we have concerns as well. So this is where my biggest concern is, and that is our projected TK to K program placement for next year for kids in preschool right now that are going to move into TK and K for next year. 15 of those students will need a moderate placement if they all enroll in our district in that TKK level. 4 are going to need extensive support needs, and 23 of these students have a primary eligibility of autism. And so this is going to require us to address how we support those students next year. And again, I've said this before, it's only November. And these are projections, so things can change one way or the other. If you look at our students in alternative placements, generally our alternative placements like non-public schools or therapeutic programs, students are having a really hard time adjusting to being in our regular schools. And this can result in a lot of dysregulation, a lot of safety issues on campus. And so at some point, we have to decide what's the best way to support them. And in our only options in those cases, when we come to a point where we can't support them in our schools and they need a higher level of support to meet their needs, we have to place them accordingly. We ended up with 19 last year. We have 22 placed so far this year, and we have a few that we're still looking to find placements for. And so these are students that have gotten to a point where we just can't help them in our regular schools, so we have to place them accordingly. So what are the staffing implications? Well, this year we added 5 new teachers for special education. We added a 0.4 addition for speech and language pathologist. Only this year alone, we've had to add 1.5 behavior analysts. So 1.5 FTE in addition to the 3 we've had, because the behaviors on our campuses have become so challenging in a number of our settings. So it's created a lot of work for us. And so our behavior analysts are not only supporting our kids in special ed, but also our students in general ed as well. But you can see by the numbers that it's been an issue. And so we added 6 instructional assistants so far. And the statistics you saw in your PDF said 8, but I had Mari, our program coordinator, check. And since November 1, we've had to add 3 more behavior technicians. And so what does that mean? So we've gone from 104 at the end of last year of aides and BTs to 123 so far this year. So already that increase has happened. And then I already shared those numbers with you, but 6 of them have been instructional assistants and 11 have been behavior technicians. That's a really important number because that never happens that way. We normally don't have to add that many behavior technicians at this point this year. So considerations. Based on the current enrollment, and again, we're only talking projections, it's only November, it could go one way or the other. With current enrollment, though, we may need to add another 4 to 5 moderate program by this January if we continue to have to add more kids in that program, because that program's at capacity right now. If our preschool projected enrollment remains, we anticipate adding 2 more moderate programs for next year that we'd have to do. And then 1 middle and 1 elementary school extensive support needs class may need to be added. Now, on the other side of that, please click over. There we go. We have started the special ed assessment process for about 10 kids right now that we're really worried about are going to need a higher level of support. And I do want to say on the other side of this, our resource classes many of them don't have the higher numbers that we usually have. They've actually gone down some. So there might be a savings on that end to offset some of these costs that may need to happen. A lot of information. This is another indication to let you know why I'm concerned with the amount of students, and mainly from a support standpoint, not because they're a burden, because they're not a burden. They're our kids, but 25 more students now require the use of a communication device. Mainly, a lot of times it's an iPad. So they can't communicate verbally necessarily or be able to communicate their wants and needs. So they need a device to be able to do that. We've added 25 more since last year. We've needed to purchase some other things just to meet these increasing needs. And so this is really it that I wanted to share. Again, it's only November, so we really, but I still think it's important. And I know that Superintendent Bear and Assistant Superintendent Bauer wanted me to make sure that we shared with you the update on this. But again, I want to finish with the same thing that I started with. Our kids. And I love this. This is Praveen, one of our new teachers over at Graham. And these are 2 students giving a presentation. He's helping students to learn how to publicly speak in his SAI classroom. And it's just a reminder, we're talking about children and we're wanting to help them to achieve what they're supposed to be achieving in life. And I'm very proud of the work we do with all our kids with special needs. And that's all I had. No questions. Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Mr. Salvaggio. So questions from the board? Trustee Henry?
Start with an easy one. The numbers for 24, 25, are those the end of year numbers and then the?
Well, some of the statistics like early on were based on current, like up to, it would say on there up to November 1 but yeah, most of the yellow slides, most of the yellow bars were all based on the end of last year.
Okay. And then the ones for this year were?
Yeah, were blue and they were, they were for this year so far.
Thank you. One of the slides that stood out to me, you highlighted it, so the slide that showed the percentage of Hispanic students in the district and the slide that showed the percentage of students with disability who were Hispanic.
Yeah.
I don't want to just make you your personal theories, but is there research around kind of the identification issues or kind of how that different proportion kind of the?
Is it okay if I share my opinion? Okay. I think there's two things going on, and one is I think sometimes our speech and language pathologists take on the role of English language development folks, and because we don't know what, our school teams, our teachers are trying to do, what do I do with these kids? So maybe if they got in special ed, they would do better. And I think you can see on the statistics, that's not true, right? And so I think that's one issue. I think early and because of the boys and the Latino Hispanic population as well, I think you have the combination of many times boys access language and learning somewhat delayed compared to girls. And I think what happens is you have the squiggly syndrome going on, boys going over the place, and also boys not accessing their learning at the same levels. And as a result of that, they ended up in special education at higher rates. And so I think the more we can create a much better English language development strategy that really works for kids and make sure we have a good MTSS system in place to make sure that we're doing what's necessary, I think we'll see that progress. And I do think everybody's working hard. But that's my theory on what's going on. And we're not alone in the state. This is happening throughout the state.
Trustee Conley?
Thank you very much for the presentation. Kind of along the lines of something that I asked you about last year, I think. I've heard from a small number of families, so it's anecdotal,
Mhm.
who have moved from one school site to another, and their experience with accessing special education is like night and day
Yeah.
between the two schools. And it's both within our district, but at one site, once they moved there, there was a wrapping around of, well, let's figure out assessment. Let's get our behaviorist in to observe your child. And then very quick movement on an IEP versus in their original placement, there wasn't. So I'm wondering if you can speak about how we're training our principals and school staff and school psychologists at all of our sites to kind of be on the same page about how we approach assessment and services and developing IEPs.
Yeah, it's I think a fair question. And we try to do a lot of training on the process. One of the things I like to say is when we're talking about a learning problem, we have to go through that multi-tiered systems of support process and make sure we're trying those general education interventions as much as possible. And to me, you are talking about a while that's going to take place, maybe 2 iterations of 8 weeks of really trying strategically focused interventions on the general ed side. So that's more of like when we have learning issues going on. When we're talking about students that are having active behavior issues, or maybe we suspect that it might be autism, or we might suspect other types of disabilities that are really causing dysregulation. I think when we're talking about that situation, we don't want to wait if we suspect a disability on those situations, because we've got to get those kids help right away. And so that's the message we try to send, is it depends what we're talking about. We don't want to go to assessment too early if we're talking about a learning issue. But if we're talking about other things that have to do with rigidity or accessing the environment, or working in groups, or we suspect autism or another type of disability that requires more immediate help, we want to go to eligibility consideration for those. Does that help?
That does. I will say in the situations I've heard about, it's probably that second larger group
Mhm.
that these students fell in. But I think, when I was in the classroom a while ago, um, there was often and the culture has changed.
Mhm.
Then it was, don't do anything until a child is 2 years behind academically.
Yeah.
And I was a kindergarten teacher, and I was like, that's not good enough. Early intervention matters. But and so I don't know if it's that we have people who have had that as historical experience who are still in that mindset. But perhaps I don't know if it's possible to do some sort of survey of parents within either whose children are already within our special programs, or I don't know if we ask about this directly in our LCAP. Is there a way to hear? I'm only hearing about it because people feel like they can trust me and come and talk to me about it. But is there a way to gather more information about
Sure.
people's experience accessing services at different school sites?
Yeah, and let me just say one more thing about that. So keep in mind that within IDEA or within special education, one of the main questions is are they accessing their education? In other words, how that's been interpreted, maybe by site, could be that, look at this student is really doing well academically. They have no issues in general education, but it doesn't mean access is working. And those are two different things. And so we have been trying to have this message that even though a student is at grade level on testing, they do really well, that doesn't mean they're accessing their education well. They may need help in doing that and how to work on some of those soft skills and, and that type of thing. So we really have been trying to get that message out, but we're happy to do surveys and in fact, that's one of the reasons why I have the advisory committee is for us to give input where they're getting insight from their own campuses to let us know what's going on.
And I think the good news is that this family, well, I'm thinking of a couple of families actually had very positive experiences once they transferred. So some of our teams are really kind of taking in what you're sharing with them. And I think some of our teams still need some more support.
Sure.
So I'm interested in how we do that.
Yeah, good insight.
I have a few questions. When you mentioned that it's November and the numbers can change, why is that? Is that because more children are identified in these groups, or are people moving into the district, or?
I think a combination of both factors. You're going to have kids move in, and then also there are going to be students that need to be assessed because they have needs. Having said that, the numbers can go another way too. We can have a bunch of kids move out of the district. You just don't know right now, but the trends right now, especially my biggest concern is preschool. I've been in those classes a handful of times, and I can tell you that we're talking about pretty impacted students that are going to need some support when they come up through the grades.
So, and then another question I have is when a child is identified with certain needs, do they generally require these needs throughout the time they are in our school district, or can they go back to the general population or into the general population?
It depends on the needs. I think when you're talking about moderate to extensive support needs, generally these kids are going to be those types of programs overall. When you're talking about like speech and language impairment, a lot of these students eventually get dismissed from speech and language impairment. And you do see sometimes students can go on a 504 that might have dyslexia or once on an IEP, but are able to go on a different kind of plan. But are more moderate to extensive support needs, there's other factors that are going on with them.
Okay, thank you. My last question is sort of important for one of the other items we have in the agenda tonight. Over just a rough number, what do these programs cost the district per year?
I don't know. You'll have to.
That will come in a later presentation.
Yeah.
You're fine to pun. That's
Right. Yeah. You're talking about having a teacher. You're talking about having
the teachers,
instructional
you're talking
assistant
about
support
desk and rooms and all
and
this. Yeah.
speech therapy and others.
We can hold that. It's fine
Yeah.
for
Mhm.
another meeting. Any more questions from the board?
Just a quick question, and it might be someone who's more of a historian amongst our staff. Didn't we a long, long time ago, this was before I was on the board, have an autism-based preschool at Slater? Is that correct? Or some sort of like an autism specific preschool program?
Well, I think our preschool program was located there, right? And then we moved it and now it's at Therakoff. So we do have our special ed preschool program at Slater, and that's what
That's where you're saying.
Director Salvaggio is talking about.
Okay.
Right. I think just to add to Trustee Lambert's question, with the preschool, what happens is as students turn 3, then they are coming into our district to be assessed. So they're moving from one program to another within the system. And so so kids turn 3 over the course of the whole year. So we're looking at new kids as they age up.
Okay, thank you. Trustee DeFazio?
Yes. So with some of like the overrepresentation and identification that we see combined with kind of how our school boundaries are set, do we see things correlating with that? And how do we balance, I think, right, like wanting to have, right, the least restrictive, which is generally like we want them in general education classes as best we can. How do we keep an eye on that or balance to make sure that they are kind of not overly concentrated in certain areas, and how do we manage that or make sure that like everyone's getting like the right least restrictive education that they can?
I'm wanting to make sure I understand the question. So are you saying that because, are you talking about the Hispanic Latino population or?
Yes, or boys, and like any of the demographics that we see, like these are
Yeah.
probably going to be kind of correlated with the demographic makeups of our schools, which are varying in different ways, and like that probably adds a second layer of concentration onto kind of at the individual school sites. And like how do we support the schools to make sure that they can do that, and make sure every kid's getting what they need?
Yeah, as far as the breakdown, as far as do we have higher percentage of students in special education at some of the schools? I think that's more naturally going to happen just because of those concentrations. And I showed you the numbers already. So you're going to see a higher concentration of kids percentage wise that are in some of those schools. Yeah.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Salvaggio. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on this item? Do not see anyone in person, and I do not see anyone online. Therefore, we will return to the board for comments. Any comments? On the board? Trustee Henry.
I just wanted to say how grateful I am for the approach that you take to leading this department. Hearing you say things like talking about how being able to access education, even though a student may be testing on grade level, doesn't mean that there may be some challenges in accessing education that need to be explored. I'm just grateful that you're here.
Any further comments? Trustee DeFazio.
Yeah, I'm really, I think just to echo Trustee Henry, I'm really thankful that we really strive to make sure that we are not necessarily just doing the bare minimum. We're making sure that like we really support all the kids in our schools. And like, I know it's a difficult task, and I think, but I love, I love the just the ability for public education to give everyone the opportunity to succeed and have all of the things that they need. And so I'm really thankful for that.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Reed.
I agree. Seeing the photos from the Special Olympics and the photos that you showed of their Thursday Graham Cafe where they're serving staff, providing not just opportunity for them to access education, but overall experiences, because growing that background, those independent living skills, those opportunities for interaction are so important for these students, but also showing us the trends in the increased number that are coming up. And this isn't just this district. I think in my district as well, we're seeing not just an increase in the number, but kind of the range of the extensive support needs in particular, and preparing ourselves for what's to come or what's coming up the channel is great to start to think about, and really excited about that outdoor learning space, particularly for these students at Graham that's going in. So when that comes in, that's, I don't know of any other district that has or that's going to have a space like that. So continuing to view these as children we want to serve and provide experiences for like everybody else. Thank you for your work.
Trustee Conley.
Thank you. I echo my colleagues' thanks. I think this is such a challenging facet of education is we talk about how hard differentiation is, and then we look at like really, really different needs that children have. And you know, one of the other challenges is when a child's needs aren't being met, we haven't figured it out, or maybe they haven't gone through assessment or what have you. Um, the way that that presents in dysregulation in the classroom can be really disruptive. And um, it can be challenging for the teacher, it can be challenging for the other students in the classroom, it can be challenging to a school site. And, you know, I appreciate that we are trying to solve these problems, that we're trying to be proactive. When there's a problem, your team is trying to figure out how to fix it in conjunction with our superintendent. Because when I hear about behavior, I automatically think, what does that child need? Why is this behavior happening? How are we able to support them better in being able to access their education and being regulated at school? And so I hope that we can continue. I like the forecasting that you're doing from preschool, that we can continue to try and plan as best we can so that by the time our children get into a more formal classroom setting, kindergarten still has a little bit of wiggle room, but by the time they get to first grade, it's become much more structured and kind of intensive. And so how much can we identify supports for students before they get to that point is a very important piece. And then I appreciate you're always so responsive when I ask hard questions and open to trying to solve them. I still hear in the community that there's some work to do about making sure that all of our school sites are kind of doing this in the same way and how they're supporting families. And I don't think that's just a your department issue. I think that's a broader district thing that we need to work on. But I am glad to hear the willingness and the energy around, the messaging that you're already using is what we should be using at every site. But how do we continue to support our staff with that?
Thank you, Trustee Reed.
And the 25 AAC devices, I know sometimes with this population of students, functional communication, if it's not available for them to communicate in ways that work for them, that's when dysregulation and you see an increase in maladaptive behaviors. I'd be interested to see how the introduction of these 25 AAC devices plays out in that. Do we see a lowering of maladaptive behaviors, and do we see an increase in access?
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Oh, you're gonna respond?
Okay. Let me just say, I will find that information out for you because we have an AAC specialist that can give us that data. And so I'll ask Andrea to give us some insight into that, but I can tell you it makes a big difference. Yeah.
Any final comments? Don't see any. Thank you very much, Mr. Savaggio. We'll move on to the next item, item B. This is an action item. Approval of school plans for student achievement, and Ms. Bauer will present.
Yep. So I'm here and Dr. Nguyen is actually online tonight. But we are here tonight to ask you to approve the school plans for student achievement. Plans were posted to the district website on October 20th, and sites did quite a bit of work with their staff and their communities to develop these plans throughout the course of the fall. I thank you for all the time you dedicated to meet with our site principals to learn about all of their plans. We attended many meetings between Dr. Nguyen, myself, and Director Chang. So again, asking tonight that you approve the plans.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bauer. Any questions from the board? Mr. DeFazio.
Yeah, so I noted when we were looking at the plans that there were kind of intermediate milestones and kind of regular reviews. Would it be possible for us to get updates on those progress over time? Right, a year is a long time, but it might be useful. I don't know what format it would take, but is that something that you'd be able to kind of assemble for us?
I think we would have to look at, that. I mean, we could look at some of the pieces, especially like iReady and those types of things. I think we also need to consider that just the sheer number of goals in the plans, and maybe this is something we want to consider not that I don't want to provide updates, but maybe it's something we want to wrap into a revision of our process as we move into next year.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this item? Do not see anyone in person. And I do not see anyone online. Or we will return to the board for comments. Any comments from the board? Trustee Conley?
Thank you, President Lambert. I want to thank all of the school site councils and principals and district staff who worked on putting these plans together. It is a pretty comprehensive process. I'm looking forward to seeing how these plans play out over this year, but I also am looking forward to updating this process for future years. I think using 10% growth for our academic scores, it's both logical, but also a little bit arbitrary. And so if we can really drill down on our subgroups, or I don't want to say, let me reframe that. If we can really drill down on our different groups and maybe set goals that aren't just 10% a year for our different student groups, especially for our students who are the furthest behind, 10% a year isn't, if everyone's doing 10% a year, it's not going to close gaps. And we want to close gaps, right? And so I look forward to that as a possible revision. And then poor Ms. Bauer and other staff who had to listen to me bemoan the use of 10 percentage points for goals 4 and 5 for things like let's change chronic absenteeism by 10%. Let's change some of these other rates, suspension rates by 10%. Like it doesn't make sense for those goals. And so coming out of kind of renewing our strategic plan a little bit and going back to being really focused on trying to close some of those gaps as well. I'm hopeful for a new take on kind of, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but a new take on how we're doing this next year so that it feels more meaningful for all of our staff, which I think really engages people in being educational leaders themselves and serving our students best.
Trustee DeFazio?
Yeah, I also want to thank staff. I think we met with all the principals. Thank you, Director Nguyen, you're remote, but answering my questions specifically and doing a lot of work to address them. And I think, you know, all the community members who have volunteered to work on these and go through them, like, to echo your statements about refining our goals, right? I view this as we go through that, and I think we'll probably schedule like probably a study session or something for how we want the process to work in the future. But right, I see us as having big goals as a district that we want to improve upon, and then how we get there depends on the school site, right? Like what are the important things to do at Castro are going to be different from what are the important things to do at Vargas versus Imai. And I would love more, I guess, crafted at each school site using like the on the ground knowledge that folks have for what they think is both achievable and important at their site to help us as a district achieve the goal, right? Like we're all pointing in one broad direction, but every school site's going to push in a little bit of a different way to ultimately get us there. So I really like the echoing wanting to come back and revisit this process. I'm still appreciative of all the hard work that went into this and all the work that assembled. I'm excited to see how we do on these, but yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to get even better.
Trustee Henry?
I guess I'll echo some of the comments of my colleagues so far of both the appreciation for all the time looking at how much went into these site plans and definitely the time that the principals were willing to sit down with us and talk about their sites and talk about their plans and their goals. And I look forward to hearing from you and Dr. Nguyen about you know, what your ideas are about how this can be better. And I'll acknowledge that some of those ideas were shared last spring. And the continuing conversations about that and also echoing on the 10% that is appropriate for some goals. And also there's some where maybe that's not achievable at a certain site on a certain thing and where other things where a site's ready to be much more ambitious and giving them that space to do it. And so looking forward to those continuing conversations.
Any further comments? Trustee Reed?
There's a lot of information. A lot of information for site to prepare and to present, a lot of information for us to take in. But even site specific, I think like if you were to ask any site member, what are your strategic goals for this year? A lot of them wouldn't really know how to answer that. And I felt very, looking through a lot of the documentation, like, I don't know what to focus on. There's so much here. And while so much of it is so great, it also felt like the purpose of what this year, what our goals are, gets a little lost. And so I'd love to see revision and more pointed focus year to year. It's great to know that we're doing great things, but it doesn't necessarily need to be highlighted every year. But having something where it's one site, one focus, or a few focus points where we could really lock down instead of trying, we want to change all the things every year. That's not going to happen. And when we spread ourselves too thin, then everything kind of gets lost. But if we could really kind of tailor these things to what sites need and streamline and rework and rethink how we're doing this to really try to get to some of the gaps, which are a little bit different at each site. I'd like to see how we can move forward and kind of make things fresh, but not throw out the baby with bathwater, but still find a way to make it less overwhelming.
Any further comments? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the school plans for student achievement?
So moved.
Second.
A motion from trustee Conley and a second by trustee DeFazio that the board approve the school plans for student achievement for our elementary and middle schools. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Bauer. Move on to the next item. It's an action item also. 2025 through 2026 first interim budget report and budget reductions discussion. Dr. Westover will present.
Good evening, trustees. Before we start our presentation tonight, I wanted to point out some of the documents that are attached to this evening's agenda. So in addition to the SACS documents, we put it all into one document because we found that sometimes when people had multiple documents to click on it became difficult. So in the packet is the budget at a glance. So these are for if you want a quick look at what our budget looks like. And then there's also a summary attached. So it's a narration of what is in the SACS documents. And then there is also summary tables that talk about what's in our MYP, how the numbers are changing year to year. And then after that is like 130-page SACS document. So if you really wanted to drill in, you could go in the SACS document. So in total, there's 3 different types of summary before first interim. And then we'll talk through kind of at a very high level what is in the SACS documents tonight. And then this evening, I also have Nadia Pongo presenting with me, who's our Director of Fiscal. Of course, we connect everything back to our strategic plan. We also have a board policy that says in the 3rd year, we try to hit between that 17 and 20% reserve level per our board policy. A little bit about how school district funds work. We have unrestricted funds, so these can be used for anything that's needed in the school district, and generally they will also fund programs which are underfunded, for example, like special ed. And then Trustee Lambert, you asked about the total cost of special ed. The total cost of special ed comes in at, Nadia probably hasn't memorized, 21.8 million. And then the encroachment on the general fund is about 19 million. So the unrestricted general fund is what funds that program when there's not enough to fund it in that restricted category. Restricted funds are for a specific purpose. So we get restricted funds for things like child nutrition, special ed, titles. We cannot use those funds to fund other things within the district. They are specifically for that purpose. And then we have our reserves, which is our savings account, which we're using this year to whether or not unanticipated economic uncertainty. So looking at our first interim, this is our budget process right now. Here we are in November, we're presenting our first interim. Then in January, the governor will propose his budget for the next year. So essentially we're in the next few months, we'll be running two budgets at once. We'll be finishing out this current year and we'll be trying to plan for the next year. So this data is actual data, revenue and expenses through October 31st. We have these interim reports because school budgets are intended to change. Unlike a business where you say, this is my budget for this year, we anticipate our budget is going to change. And that actually dovetails really well into Frank's presentation because we were adding employees based on the needs of the students, which is what a school district budget should do. So this is our first formal update of the current year projections since adopted budget. The budget's a living document that we just chatted about, and we don't anticipate that it's going to remain static. We're going to come back in front of the board in March to update where we are from October 31st up to second interim. So a little note about first interim. During the first interim, reserves are higher because funds that were not fully utilized at the end of the 24-25 year are rolled forward. So there's predictable patterns that we see in our budget. And at first interim, we typically see that it comes in higher because at the end of the year, when we are finishing out our budget adoption, everyone is estimating how much am I going to use to finish the year. And now if they don't use those funds, it rolls into this next year at first interim. Between now and second interim, the funds that were rolled forward will be assigned and then schools begin to use those funds that had been rolled forward. A little bit more background. We produce a 3-year multi-year projection in order to forecast the district's financial health beyond the current year. We've also started to do a 6-year multi-year projection. 3 years is what the state requires, but we also have started to do a 6-year now just to get an idea of the direction we're going. We always want to use our MYP as a guide and not as a measuring stick, again, because we expect it's going to change. So it tells us what our trajectory is, but it's going to continue to remain in flux. Between budget adoption and first interim, we have seen individual departments change their needs by up to $1 million. So that's why we have these interims, but it tells us the general direction that we're going. This is a look at our assumptions. Assumptions are what drive our budget. So the salary schedule, we have a 5% raise this year, 4% next year, and then the 27-28 year, there is no raise calculated into our MYP or the 6-year projection that we'll show later. Our assessed value, we adjusted down to 2.34. So at budget adoption, we were anticipating 3%, but we didn't quite hit that 3%. So in the first interim budget, you'll see it's adjusted down to 2.34. And in the out years, we have projections at 2%. I have a slide coming up that will talk a little bit about AV growth and kind of what other districts are doing in the area, because this is a very unusual time. Then we look at CalSTRS and CalPERS rates. These are set by others, not by the district. Our parcel tax income that's coming in, the CPI, and our shoreline revenue. Shoreline revenue always operates a year behind with our agreement in the city. So this year we're getting 7.7 million. Next year we anticipate 7 million, which is 1 year behind when we look at the shoreline revenue from this past year, because shoreline revenue took a dip in that shoreline area. So we're seeing that dip show up in the 26-27 year when we see the revenue go down from shoreline. So from our assessor, Greg Monteverde, roll grew by nearly 29 billion over the prior year. The rate of the growth slowed to 4.15%, down from 5.39% the previous year. This marks the lowest growth rate in a decade. So this is across the entire county, not just Mountain View. Commercial reductions surged, rising 30% in count and 181% in value. So really the number of commercial reductions increased by 30%, and then the value increased by 180%, 81%. So each one of these individual accounts, not only did we have more, but they were higher in value. This is looking at assessment growth by city, not by school district, but by city. And you can see Mountain View there at the top at 0.51%. We were the lowest in the county. In the small print below, it talks a little bit about why Mountain View was so low. Last year, we had a banner year in comparison to the rest of the county. This year, we're the lowest, mainly because of commercial property. What propped us up was 3 large residential buildings that came onto the roll this year. That number is also, if there's questions about, well, that's 0.51%, but we're showing 2.3%. That's because that's the entire city of Mountain View, including the shoreline area, which is separated for us. This is looking at the same information, but in table format. We've had past discussions about budget reductions. In the past, we've been very fortunate that our parcel tax passed, that was $5.1 million, and shoreline funds, we were able to reach agreement with the city. So each time there was a release valve for the discussions we had been talking about that were facing our budget. This time, there is no such release valve because we aren't able to say, turn on the light, make AV growth go up. There's no way to take a vote on this. AV growth is what it is based on what's happening in the city. So this discussion is different than the discussion we've had in previous years. Earlier, I was saying we talk a little bit more about AV projections. So neighboring districts, Santa Clara, Los Altos, and MVLA, they're seeing similar things to what we're seeing to different degrees because each city, each school district has a different makeup within their boundaries. Mountain View Westman is about 50% commercial, 50% residential. Other cities have different mixes, different income drivers, but we're seeing that AV growth is dropping. What we're also seeing for projection wise is why are we saying 2%? So you're looking at the blue bar, which is on 9/8, what the assessors report projected for that school district, and then how that school district is projecting in the out years. So you'll notice every district in the area is attempting to be a little conservative to make sure that they don't have a shortfall. And so this shows that us on the left-hand side, so our AV came in at 2.3, and we're projecting at 2% in the out years. When we look at Santa Clara, Los Altos, and MVLA, they are all doing similar things. So this is not something out of the ordinary. So moving forward, the county assessor has shared that we should anticipate 2 to 3 more years of the same or less. Roll for the current year is projected to be 2.34%. This year, we have weathered the storm with our strong reserves. So we made no changes, and we are very, very fortunate that the district is in very good financial health. Because if we did not have the reserve levels that we have, we would have been coming to you mid-year and saying, we need to start cutting absolutely everything that we can. But we can't continue this way. If we continue spending at the rate that we're spending, we will put ourselves into a fiscal crisis. We don't want to get there. So now we have the ability to make decisions to avoid that crisis so we can keep the focus on student learning. This is looking at our assessed value growth by year. So on the left-hand side, we have 2014, 2015, and then going all the way out to the 26, 27, and 27, 28 year. You can see that AV growth has gone up and down over the years, but we have never been this low before. So this is something new for our district. This is looking month by month. So we also track AV by what's happening each month within our boundary, and we get a report from the county assessor. So each line, you can see that it's moving throughout the year. And right now we are the black line showing at 1.25%. The green line was last year.
Good evening, trustees. I will go over the major revenue changes and expenditure changes since budget adoption. So all these changes are now being reflected in the first interim budget report. For the revenue, we talk about assessed value and adjusting it down. We're currently projecting at 2.34%. The carryover definitely has an impact on our current first interim budget report, the $4.4 million of carryover. A portion of it impacts our revenue portion, and the rest of it affects our expenditure side. We adjusted our CalPERS rate, which was a little bit beneficial for us. We also had a couple of one-time funding including the student and professional development discretionary block grant for 1.3 million, but this is only a one-time funding. We are also recognizing the revenue of 1.4 million in our books for the revenue of the former superintendent home loan for the home sale. And the expenditures, we are we drew up our position control. So we have savings of 2.3 million. And this is like, we adjust the current staffing allocation as well as vacancies. We increase our substitutes rate. So we increase our budget for around $200,000. We are also increasing our MOT budget for mainly contracted services. This also includes the MOT gas line repairs and as well as some grants that we projected last year but didn't materialize. We are planning to spend these funds in the current year. So here we have our first interim for the general fund with programs restricted and unrestricted. We are projecting a net decrease of 4.7 million with a reserve level of 33.43%. This slide is itemizing the major items that we use in our multi-year projection. Next slide, please. So here by this state, we are required to a 3-year multi-year projection. In this multi-year projection, we also like to include the figures we presented to you during budget adoption. I just went over the major changes for budget adoption to first interim. And the year 2 and year 3 and the revenue portion, we are not including the revenue from leases for Google. That has an impact. In the expenditure side for year 2, we are including the 4% salary increase as well as the stepping column cost. In year 3, we are not including any salary increases in this projection, but we are including the stepping column. Another item that we are capturing at first interim, in addition to the contribution to special education, preschool, cafeteria, and MOT, we are including contribution to the program of ELOP. So as we can see in the 3rd year out, we have a reserve level 11.12%, which is definitely lower than the desirable 17% reserve level. And with that, I pass it back to Dr. Westover.
We also listed past presentations that we've had this year. I think this has been building over time since the beginning of the year. We talked about end of the year financials. We talked about revenue and AV and how that drives our budget. We also discussed different budget scenarios, adjusted revenues with a 6-year MYP, and then we also went through the cost of different programs. So this year we've done a lot on the finances of the district. This chart probably looks very familiar at this point, but the majority of our budget is spent on personnel. So the green, the orange, and the blue reflect certified and classified employees. And then the purple bar at the top is our contracted services. 85% of contracted services is actually direct student support in the classroom, rhythm and moves, instructional assistance, for example. The blue bar is books and supplies. I think when we think about trying to make reductions, if we were to reduce our spending on supplies and materials by 50%, we would save about $500,000, which doesn't nearly cut the deficit that we need to cut these upcoming few years. This is looking at contracts by function, what I had just mentioned before. Of course, 85% going to direct instruction within the classroom. We then did a 6-year projection with lease revenue. So our official projection that is in our first interim does not have the lease revenue in it, but we are anticipating that we hopefully will get that lease revenue from Google. So this is looking at a 6-year projection adding in that Google lease revenue, and that leaves us at negative 16.41% reserve in the 6th year. So going definitely a direction that we are not able to sustain. So this is the same information in graphical format, the orange line showing our reserve level and the blue line showing our deficit spend. So we're going to go through some data over the next couple of several slides. It's important to know where the data comes from because we can pull data from all different places. Depending where you're pulling it from, it can be slightly different. So the data for positions or FTE was taken from our position control system as well as payroll. Positions can be listed as a partial position if they were not filled for the full year. So we don't have half a person. They maybe started a couple weeks late, so you'll see partial numbers there. Positions are organized by how they are coded in the system and the function they provide and where the funds are coming from. This is looking at, since the 2017-18 year, looking at our non-management, which is our green bar, certified FTE, and our classified non-management FTE, which is our blue bar. And then we have enrollment with the line going across the top. So in general, what we see is enrollment after COVID has declined, but our FTE, the number of people that we have, both our teachers and our support staff, has increased. In this chart, we're looking specifically at management FTE versus enrollment. So in the orange bars are our certified FTE, the red bars are our certified classified admin FTE. For the years for 22-23, we added some explanation for what these FTE were from. Because sometimes the question is, I don't know if we have any more principals on staff. We have the same number of principals, but for example, in the 22-23 school year, we added 2 mental health specialists and 1 program coordinator for health and wellness and 1 assistant principal at Graham. And this was all in response to when we came back from the pandemic, there was a request for more mental health support. So those are the positions that were added. In the 23-24 year, we added 3 program coordinators for special ed because we were seeing the need for more special ed support, 1 psychologist, and 1 director of early literacy. In the 24-25 year, we removed 2 program coordinators. We removed the director of equity, and then we had personnel moves to school admin. In this year, we added 1 mental health specialist, and then we also had various administrative moves. This next chart is both graphs together, but then showing the trend line for certified FTE in green, and then the trend line for classified FTE in blue. So we'll see that both of those trend line is increasing. The same thing for our classified and certified management, while our trend line for enrollment is going down. Then we wanted to look at our math and ELA scores of met or exceeded versus total FTE. So in the yellow line, we have total FTE after COVID. In the 1920 and 2021 year, we did not have testing, so there's no data available. But we noticed that FTE is not connected to our math or ELA scores. So more staff does not necessarily equal better test scores. This is the same information, but in a chart format showing that the same thing that we saw in the graphs, that we have increased FTE, decreased enrollment, and then a couple of notes about the big programs that were added in the 2021 year. We added additional at-risks and SCEFs at our school sites to try to help with coming back from the pandemic. In the 23-24 year, we added the early literacy team, and in the 25-26 year, counselors at every site. So we see those counts in the years in this table. This is looking at FTE change over time based on the department or their function. The data is based on information from our financial system at the end of the year. This is also looking at change in FTE over time. A couple of things to call out: noon duty. So at the bottom of the chart, you'll see noon duty is 0. In that year, noon duty were hourly, they were not FTE, so they're not counted here. Also, something important to note is special ed. This does not include contractors. This includes only individuals that are FTE internally hired by the district. So that number is not fully representative of the number of staff that are helping with special ed right now. So for board consideration, knowing there is a structural deficit of 11.3 million for the 26-27 budget year with lease revenue assumptions, staff recommends ongoing expenditure reductions of 9 million. So this is probably the bare minimum of what we need to do. This is cushioning a soft landing. I'll show you a 6-year MYP in just a moment with what this could look like. This doesn't stop our deficit spend. This simply reduces it enough so that previous 6-year MYP, the line was going straight down into the negative. This really just levels it off a little bit in the hopes that eventually AV will come back. So 9 million doesn't fully address the imbalance, but it's significant enough to allow reserves to sustain us for a bit longer.
If I could just say a word about these, right?
Got it.
Because we've gotten, you can go ahead to the next one. But we've, in these next several slides, we tried to make as clear as possible at the top in red that these weren't recommendations. But these were put forward to really understand the magnitude of what $9 million will require, right? What sort of reductions $9 million is going to require to be made. Again, none of these are recommendations, but just really illustrative in that way.
So looking at about half or 4 million plus coming from the district office, including instructional coaches, district office administrators, and support personnel. 4 million coming from school sites, which can be a combination of several things that we'll list, combo classes, reduction, reorganization of counselors and behavior techs, moving from ELOP to BTP after school model, eliminate RTI and STEAM, and have elementary classroom teachers assume the responsibility for science instruction, but keep rhythm and moves as contractual release time. Alternatively, we could eliminate rhythm and moves, and then elementary classroom teachers would assume responsibilities for PE instruction and keep STEAM as a contractual release time. So for this option of these two items, we would need to pick one or the other. We couldn't do both. Reductions or reorganization for SCEF and ARIS positions, move to part-time night custodians, so meaning that our classrooms would be cleaned every other day, reduction in clerk hours.
I can just make a quick comment again. So what was listed there, those with the exception of the RTI STEAM and rhythm and moves, those are choices there, right? But in order to reach the 9 million, it would be inclusive of everything that's listed.
Other items that are not as impactful, but ways that we can save small amounts in order to try to help. We could limit overtime to essential hours. We could reduce technology. We could turn off irrigation at the front of schools that have grass. This would accomplish water savings and then eventually help us comply with regulations that are coming in the future. We can create an incentive plan to reduce staff absenteeism. We spend about 900,000 on substitute teachers each year, and explore ways to reduce energy usage. So again, this is for illustrative purposes only. We could choose to close one school and make reductions primarily at the district office level. Or we could choose to close 2 schools with minimal additional reductions. Again, this is for illustrative purposes only. This is not a suggestion. This is looking at what it would look like if we had the lease revenue and we made $9.5 million in reductions, but this does not include raises past the 26-27 school year. So I think if you initially look at this, you're like, that line is still going down. Yes, the line is going down, but the trajectory is not the same. And we are also ending at the 20-30-31 year at 16.02% reserve, which keeps us pretty close in bounds of where we would like to be, but this also does not include any raises. So there's some pieces in here that are still for consideration, but it does change the trajectory of that line.
And I think just adding to that, the idea of changing the trajectory of that reserve level line is the anticipation that in the out years, perhaps years 5 and 6, that we will again see some AV growth that will help us reduce that deficit spend.
So for next steps, we're asking for the board's direction on the reductions, and then staff will work to bring recommendations to the board in January 2026. Concurrently, we'll receive Orinda study results to inform those recommendations.
So I'll just clarify at this point, we're not looking for a discussion on what reductions you would like to see considered, et cetera, even though we put some illustrative examples up there. What we're really looking for is a target number so that we can begin to do some work between now and January to really identify where we can find reductions that will total the directed amount, and we would bring those back to you at future board meetings.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Westover. Okay, questions from the board. Trustee DeFazio.
Just to be clear on the last statement, this is the list of illustrative examples there are not comprehensive and not all of the things that we're going to explore. So the absence of something there or the presence does not mean that it's something we will pursue or won't.
That's correct.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The slide that shows historical assessed value month by month, this wonderful
Yes.
slide. I've always wondered why the assessed value increases in the last 3 months of the fiscal year.
It's all about when homes are changing hands, because the majority of the homes in Mountain View are, because of it only goes up 2% a year when they're sold and it transfers ownership, it then gets reassessed.
And how about commercial real estate, which is 50%?
That is a great question. I am not sure.
Okay, basically this slide doesn't make any sense. I know it's from the assessor's office, I'm not criticizing you. Okay, but it does not make any sense to me. Okay, just my comment. Second, there's a number of slides here about FTE, certified and classified FTE. Do those numbers include the staff from contracting services?
They do not.
Okay. Let's follow up with a comment so we don't forget. I think that would be very, very helpful in this. We want to know how many, as you point out, these are classroom facing staff that are actually teaching and working with their students. That's an important number we need to know, and I would like to see that number in total. And are included in broken out in this sort of number here. That would be useful. And I think that would help. I'm sorry, I'm getting into comments, but it would help sort of move us to what the recommendations we're looking for. Those are my questions right now. Any further questions?
I guess I would just add that I have just kind of a similar question, particularly with special ed because I know that there's been an intentional hiring of people in-house versus contracting. So just it would help me when we have more conversations to have a better understanding of particularly that category of the total spending and the way that, because when we're thinking about potential dropping of FTE numbers in different areas, like how the contracted numbers match up with what we're spending already. Because I guess I'm imagining that given the direction we've been going in, particularly in special ed, that it would otherwise be a positive thing that 119 might go up and contracting might go down because we would be hiring our own SLPs or other people and that may not be, seeing the way those two numbers go together would be helpful for me next time we talk about this. At least when it's a category that has things in both.
Sure. I think something to keep in mind for special ed is in general, special ed, we don't have control over how many people we hire because the people that we hire are in response to students and what's in their IEP. So we shouldn't and can't adjust those numbers. Just as a reference point, if it's helpful.
Yes, but it just didn't, as I'm understanding
Yep,
kind of
you got it.
what it means, like, yeah, absolutely, that those wouldn't be positions that would be reduced,
Sure.
but that where that compares to other spending or just how it fits.
Trustee Conley?
I think this is one of those discussions where questions and comments are going to be hard to tease apart, which is totally fine. Um, so just kind of for broader context, well, we know also many of those special education teachers or other providers are moving to only being contract based. They don't want to work full time for a district. And then districts have always run into this balance with their union partners as well between FTE, full-time employees, and contracted employees, in part because full-time employees are an ongoing expense that you are contractually committed to year after year after year, and contracted employees are not. They're generally easier for districts to have fluctuate. And, whether or not there are plenty of debates that happen on school districts, school boards and in school districts. And that's a whole thing. I don't want to unpack that can of worms, but I just want to point that out for the board. I was curious, I'm looking at what other districts are doing because everyone around us is making cuts right now. And Cupertino has a completely different slate of proposed cuts and they're voting on it. They may have already voted on, no, they're going to vote on it soon. So Trustee Reed, you might chime in because what they are really targeting, and they're trying to get 8 million in cuts, is they're decreasing middle school electives. They're cutting their TK to half day. Oh, they changed that today. See, that's why I'm asking Trustee Reed. And they are also they have an early retirement package that they're rolling out. And none of those things are in our slides. And so I'm curious, either from Trustee Reed or Superintendent Bear, kind of the thinking behind, are those things worthwhile exploring or not exploring for our district? I'm ambivalent. I'm just curious at the complete difference.
I can speak to the early retirement. So we accept all years of service. So hypothetically, we could offer a incentive we have an incentive to tell us you're going to leave, which we will be doing so we can plan. And then there's
That's going to come to the board in December, right? That Ms. Green had mentioned that, right? We'd like to know earlier rather than later. So we're going to try to incent that.
But in terms for an early retirement incentive, so some districts, if they know they have teachers on the high end, they can put enough money there to make it say, hey, maybe you can retire a year early because they know they're going to recapture that savings because our most experienced teachers are the ones that are the most expensive. In our case, because we accept all years of service, it will be a toss-up who comes through the door. So most likely it will be a younger teacher, but it could also be a teacher that has 15 years of service. So it makes it harder for us to say, yes, we want to incentivize it because we don't know what's going to come in the door. If we set a limit, and this would be something that we'd have to do through the CBA, we could say we're only going to accept 7 years of experience. So some districts do that still, but we do not. We accept all years of service. So wherever you are is where you get placed.
And we could choose who we hire as well, right? We do have some control over that.
We can choose who we hire, yes, but I don't think we ever take years of service into consideration when we're interviewing.
We haven't previously, right? But it is,
I think that
it
would
is a
be
lever.
illegal.
I mean, I think it's, in the grand scheme of things, you want the most experienced and best qualified people in front of your students, right? So
Yes.
there are issues around early retirement, and also, is the package actually worthwhile for the person? See, that's complicated. I was just interested that we didn't have any of the same. And TK, we haven't talked about half-day TK. I don't know if that's something that, yes, Ms. Bauer.
I think Ms. Bauer and I just talked about this Wednesday, maybe.
Yep. So we can go to half. So the law says that if you have a full day kindergarten, your kindergarten and your TK hours have to match. You can apply for a waiver. There's a whole process. We have done this in the past. We have actually applied for a waiver through the CDE. There's a process where as you talk to your unions, you talk to your parents, you make a case for why you would go from a full day to a half day, and then you send it off to the state board makes a decision on that. I think we have to consider what that would look like for our teachers. Would they be teaching an AM session and a PM session? There's a lot of things to consider with that, but it's something we can look at. There's just a process with it.
I think the way you capture a reduction there is by reducing the FTE, right? Which would require a teacher to teach both AM and PM, right?
Yeah, let me just remind everybody. I think the solutions to the 10 million, is we're going to hold that for another session. And rather than talk about hypotheticals now without a full accounting, we'll just get into a rabbit hole of.
That was going to be my follow-up question.
Please sort of.
That's absolutely fair. I think I've been hearing from other districts, and so I was just curious about that list, but we do have a lot of information that we're still gathering. So thank you.
I think, if you don't mind, or just allow the public, to make their comments if they wish, and then we can go back to our question comment period. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item? I see we have one person, speaker in person. Is there anyone online who wishes to speak? Don't see anyone online, but I invite Ms. Good to present. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to say I agree. Fiscal responsibility is indeed essential for the Mountain West Municipal School District to maintain. However, I have some grave concerns that the budgets presented year after year are inaccurate. For at least the past 7 years, we've been presented multi-year projections that always indicate oncoming doom. And yet, thankfully, that has not come. But these repeated inaccurate projections of financial catastrophe indicate a problem with how we're predicting things. I recognize that it's challenging, but I don't know if we have a poor ability to predict, whether there's a choice for what we're including in these predictions, which has been discussed in the past, whether that relates to an underlying agenda to have change in certain ways, I'm not sure, but there's something wrong with our predictions. Recently, many to most years have predicted an approximate $5 million deficit each year, with up to a $20 million deficit by the third year projection. And this is not the first year that we've talked about catastrophe, that we've talked about how things are going in a bad direction. It's year after year. And yet the beginning balance as of July 1st has grown every year for the past 6 years and was static for the 7th year. And that's as far back as I went. I cite examples. In 2023, these are slides that have been presented at board meetings in the past. In the 2023 to 2024 budget, there was a $4 million deficit projected, but instead we had a $5 million surplus at the end of the year. In the 2024 to 2025 school year, we had a $3.5 million deficit projected, but instead almost a $2.5 million surplus. In the 2022 to 2023 multi-year projection, which goes to 2024, 2025, there was a greater than $14 million deficit projected, but instead there's been an almost $20 million surplus. So our numbers are just not correct. Year by year, the beginning balance has grown from 24 million in 2020 to 31 million in 2021, 38 million in 2022, 50 million in 2023, 56 million in 2024, and 58 million in 2025. And so why is this inaccuracy so important? It's because tonight you've heard a presentation outlining options for consideration, not recommendations, but options for you to eventually consider to address this speculated financial deficit disaster. And the options presented by Dr. Westover include doing things like eliminating STEAM teachers and RTI, eliminating programs to provide extremely important interventions for our students, and programs that, if eliminated, will undoubtedly reduce the quality of their education. And all of this is based upon what has been flawed financial projections in a budget that's been inaccurate in all of the past recent years. So to you, the board, I ask you to please do not yield to fear mongering. We have not yet had a deficit, even though for 6 straight years it's been predicted. So please maintain all essential programs that are student facing, and please demand a budget that is more accurate from this point on, when I recognize that it's hard to do. But if it's inaccurate year after year after year, there's something wrong that we're doing. And sometimes it's a choice to decide what items are actually included, why we had a $6.5 million shoreline revenue when really it was $7.7 million. It's huge discrepancies. The fact that it's $4 million less of a deficit now from when it was at the adopted budget just a few months ago, and we're being asked to eliminate $9 million worth of programs when things swing so wildly. Please don't make changes and cuts before we actually have a problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll bring us back to the board for comments. You know, I'd like to say one thing. First of all, I thank you very much for the graphs you've shown that show the multi-year trend lines in our district, like AV growth, the ones you have FTE, and those are extremely useful. I would, as a trustee, I would like to see those presented at least once every single year. Okay, and I think there's more that could be added. Generally, what we see is this, but it's almost impossible to understand sort of the effects of our spending and the revenues that come in, and understand how we're supposed to handle these going forward, because that's ultimately what we do. I mean, we're here looking to maybe, you know, talking about $10 million budget deficit we're facing, or more. You know, that's 10% of our budget. This is huge, right? And I think if one looked at our trend lines, one could have anticipated that this was going to happen. Okay. But we were never presented that information. The board needs that information. The public needs that information to understand what's going on. It's just, if nothing else, you know, people count on their jobs, kids count on their education, and it's very traumatic to be put in this kind of a situation. So we can do a whole lot better. There's a number of things I'd like to see, and what I'm trying to do is get from where we are now, understanding our budget, to where we want to be, to help me make informed decisions when it comes to these recommendations, you know, on how to balance the budget. For one, I think adding the FTE from the contract services to a lot of these charts, however you want to break it up, but I think they need to be included. I also would like to eventually see the FTE for certain programs, okay? Because we have in these recommendations, we sort of have to balance the needs with the expenses we're making for specific programs. Some we can't cut, okay? Some we don't want to cut. Some maybe we can. But we need to know what the amounts we're dealing with here and in the programs that we can cut. And so having the expenses broken down like that would help.
So I'll just remind you that that was presented in the October 16th
Okay.
board presentation, where each and every one of these programs was broken down with FTE per site and total cost.
And then another thing that I think it would be interesting is going to the various site plans. It was sort of impressed me how at various sites we have relatively small class sizes. And, you know, let's say 17 kids overall in multiple classes. We could be more efficient at that. So to understand some of these numbers with respect to class sizes, and also too broken it down by site as well. That would be informative to me, especially with a couple of the options that we're looking at here. So I'll stop with these suggestions now, but anything that could be done to help understand, you know, more granularity, to understand what cuts we can make and where and how much they are. Like, we sort of know saving water on a field is not going to, you know, move the needle anywhere, but
right.
We want to know where we can.
Can I just make a couple response comments? One is I'd like to make sure that we're willing to put in the time, but I want to make sure we're putting in the time in places that we're going to be able to pull a lever on, right? We can absolutely bring the costs associated with contracts like Row Health, but recognize that those are tied to special education function. And I do not believe that is something that we're going to be able to create some cost reduction in, because it's tied directly to student need. And it is true that we're using contractors in that case because of this fluctuation of student need with kids coming in and out, and not just kids coming out, but their needs changing and them requiring different types of service. And yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point I was trying to make, that there's some programs, regardless of how much they cost us, and they might be big items, we cannot cut. Okay, but we have to identify those, understand what those costs are so we can work with the other ones, right? Trustee Connolly?
No, I was just going to agree with you, President Lambert. I think that first we have to know what we have to prioritize. And some of that are things that we absolutely cannot cut. Apologies. Some of those are things that the work with Arenda is going to identify as our most impactful programming, right? And so sometimes it's about flipping the lens from, I think the slides of not recommendations, but let me show you the impact, scared a lot of people in our community. And it scared employees and it scared parents. And while I appreciate the gravity of the situation, I also think there is real power in focusing on what are we prioritizing, what is the most remarkable about what our district is doing, what is most essential and most impactful to our children every day, and let's make sure that we are preserving those really important things. You know, bless the poor principals that I had school site plans meetings with, because I asked them, I said, given our budget constraints, what are the things that you would prioritize at your school site? And of course, it's different at every single school site. And that's going to be very challenging. So as much as possible, you know, I think the work with Orenda is one effort to get more community input, especially from our principals, our staff, and our parents. But I think the ability to have programs or staffing differ by school site based on school site needs is very important. I'd rather approach this with a scalpel than a sledgehammer.
Trustee DeFazio?
Yeah, just to maybe key off of what you're saying, I think there is some value in us kind of as a board also coming to terms with like which of these things on the illustrative examples that we had gave me a visceral reaction of like it helps us prioritize, right? Like these are the things that come to you and you say like this is not something I'm willing to do, right? And these are things that I find at a higher priority. And so I think it's useful for us to have to do that painful exercise as a discussion, because I think it starts us from, as we think about why we had the visceral reaction, what is important to us and what are the programs that are really key to our students and key that need to be done. So just want to jump in on that I do, as painful as that was to see all those things there, I think there is utility in us observing that and seeing what the scope looks like.
Trustee Reed?
First, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. I was looking back at first interim reports from previous years, and the level of detail that this one went into, and the different charts and graphs and the different ways information was presented, and just the amount of information there made it so much more impactful to understand the full scope of what the district spends money on. While yes, there is some room for adding things here and there, it was really a good idea of where all this money is going to, and even people-wise. Sometimes we see a pie graph with just percentages, and then it's hard to, fathom what each one actually means, but to see the layout of, this is how many people actually this is, and at these departments or at these sites, it was very helpful to wrap our brain around. I look forward to hearing from Miranda and their evaluations, but continued conversation about what programs are really making impact on those students and trying to preserve those as much as possible, and really trying to get back to making the main thing, and what is driving the district to continue to focus on students and student achievement.
Oh, can I just make a quick comment?
Yes.
Just with regard to these last comments, I just want to reemphasize and I know you know this, but I want to reemphasize it, the gravity of the tremendous drop in AV growth is something this district has not experienced in over a decade, right? We have not grappled with that before. And that is the biggest driver that's going on here. And we need to pay attention to it because the data is accurate. It's coming, right? And I want to focus on programs that are good for students and not necessarily convenient for the adults that serve the students, right? So that's why we have Arenda here as well, to really zero in on those and really make sure that we're targeting or implementing those programs that are going to make a difference, because we keep trying, right, really hard. The people in this organization are working tremendously hard, but we are not having the desired outcomes that we want for our kids, especially our most vulnerable kids. So to preserve a program that isn't making a difference doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So, but we need to shine a light on that and understand that better.
Trustee Henry?
Yes, I think that, yes, again, thank you so much for the very thorough presentation. Such, looking back at other, first interim reports, just had a much deeper understanding of exactly what everything meant. And, I know last meeting, one of our commenters pulled out a comment from me from 2018, probably same from that era, was one of the years that, there were an examination of the budget. But as I looked back and pulled out those old agendas, that conversation was around, the district had been from 2014, 2015, 2015, 16 forward, intentionally spending down reserves, and had, one of the agendas, I think it's from December, maybe December 2017, like a long list of everything that had been added just in those few years. And this district is doing a lot. And I think so for me, I do believe that we have a financial issue we need to address. And I know I've heard the sky is falling before and it hasn't fallen, but this time I feel like we have something we need to address. In addition, this type of examination is something that I would want us to be doing right now, even separate from the financial situation, really looking at what is the impact of the programs that we're paying for, that, and are they actually serving our kids, and are they improving the outcomes, particularly for the kids that we are not doing as well for right now as we want to be. Are we, spending on things that we thought would have an income that was, would have an impact on outcome that, we're absolutely done in good faith, but it's turning out that maybe they're not having that impact that we thought they would have, and making changes there. As I appreciate that, so skipping topics a little bit, the intention of the planned cuts to just kind of level out that curve, so that knowing that things may reverse hopefully, given this area, will reverse at some point, but not knowing exactly when, that we are not feeling the need right now to cut everything to completely, project out forever that we will balance, but just to level things out to give us that breathing room. Um, and I think one of my thoughts is that it can be kind of a mix of things that where we're addressing, making sure we are streamlining and focusing on programs that are really having an impact. Maybe there are going to be some cuts that are that in between of they're a little harder, but we need to do them. And then, some of the things where there are some things that are more easily reversible than others, something like the example of going to every other night for custodial services. That's something that will save X amount of money in this period of time. And then if it turns out we don't need to do that long term, that's something that can be reversed, as opposed to the examples of closing a school or something like that that are a lot harder to change from. I realize those are those are not interchangeable. But those are some of the things in my mind of having some things in the mix that are, that are a little bit kind of reversible as we see, how things look a few years down the road.
Trustee DeFazio?
Yeah, just that just brings to mind, I think also, thanks, Superintendent Bear's comments. I think all of this is, this is spurred on by the dramatic change in assessed value growth and things, but I do think there is, regardless of the situation, there is significant value in us understanding the effectiveness of the programs, moving the needle. This is the inciting event for us to do this, but I think regardless, we do need to make sure that we are getting the results that we need for the students in the classroom from the money that we are spending, that we're entrusted with. And so regardless, it's important for us to be doing this well and having this analysis and looking through what works.
Okay, I just want to remind everyone that what we've been asked to do is to propose a number for reductions that will help the staff give a target that they can work on, trying to meet, and then come back with proposals to the board. I'm ready to make that decision. Trustee, that my recommendation, but trustee.
I mean, it seemed like the staff recommendation from the slide presentation was 9 million.
Yes.
And so, I think this is, if we all started poking at different numbers, it would be a little bit like pin the tail on the donkey with blindfolds on, because we aren't financial experts. And, but I'm curious to hear from the rest of the board. Before we move on to that, I wanted to make a small comment that we want to know which programs are having the most impact. It's so challenging to know that sometimes. So, and I know we've discussed this before, but just that reminder of some of the impacts might not be test scores. Some of the impacts might be that we have a child who is living in a car and they are fed and they are safe and they have mental health supports and they come to school every day excited to see their friends and do some of these other activities that we might not put strictly in the bucket of English language arts and math. And just as long as we still hold in our mind that Miranda's not doing, statistical regression analysis on this. We're not going to have causation for our outcomes, but they are going to help us have a better understanding to prioritize.
Trustee DeFazio?
No, I thought I was for guidance. I think if we think we need 9 or so, an additional buffer for us as we discuss the programs would be useful, so that as we can discuss prioritization, we don't have to take the menu of options that'll get us there. Giving us some additional breathing room, I think, would be helpful for us to be able to have the discussion of prioritization and what things are there, right? So we have some ability to do that. So I don't know what that number should be, but
Yeah, I agree with Trustee DeFazio is, move it up to 10 or 11 even, and we can always back off, but it sort of presents a challenge to us, and if we have to back it off, we feel better, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Trustee Henry, looks like you're
Oh, I was just going to agree that I think that looking at our conversation in January, that looking at that 9 million total, and then again, that's 2 months from now, we can continue our conversations, but with maybe, the wiggle room on the list of suggestions so that we kind of know what potential things are sort of interchangeable or I guess maybe more, I guess what you're saying, more options than exactly than.
So, and having lived through former life, right, budget cuts process, as harsh as it sounds, to do everything at once rather than to die a slow death by 1,000 knives is, I think, much better. And mainly by morale, because then if it's slow, then morale suffers, and that's hard to regain.
Yep. Okay. Just a couple comments based on what I heard, just for mindset. One, I think Trustee Henry mentioned she brought it to me. Thank you. Minutes from the December 2018 meeting, right, in which it was a recap of the charge that was given at the time to spend down the reserve, essentially, right? And the one thing I'll comment on, right, is that reserves are one-time money, right? And when I look at this list, they're largely ongoing expenses, right? So that works until, for us, AV growth doesn't come through, right? So increase overall compensation by 23%, added RTI teachers, added instructional coaches, added school community engagement facilitators, all great, right? And good, well intended, but all ongoing expenses, and with increased compensation over time, that catches up at some point. And we're here. I think we all understand that we're here at that point. So I will keep reminding you during this process about ongoing and one-time expenses. And I absolutely appreciate your comments, Trustee Conley, about, I agree that not all success is measured by a test score. We are going to have to prioritize, right? Because we cannot do everything we're currently doing. And I just think that the outcomes for kids, because of our diffusion, I think the outcomes for our kids in terms of their academic success in this case is taking it. So I think if we could refine it, and that, again, Arenda will help us, we're going to be much more successful.
Okay, do you have, Dr. Westover, the direction you need from the board about the target expenditure reductions?
I do. Although, can I maybe ask for a vote on first interim?
Like a vote on that?
Yes, please.
We have to vote to approve the.
Oh, I will approve the budget deficit separately. I've asked you. You've got the direction.
Yes, I have
to the
everything I need. Thank you.
Reduction. Okay, got it.
Yes.
Okay, you're absolutely right. The other recommendation, which I was going to get to. Do I have a motion from the board to approve the 2025-26 first interim budget report? Come on, Trustee Henry.
I move to approve the 2025-26 first interim budget report.
Second.
A motion by Trustee Henry and a second by Trustee DeFazio that the Board of Trustees approve the 2025-2026 first interim budget report as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to item 9, community comments. This is a time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The Board of Administration welcomed this opportunity to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agenda items. Is there any member of the public wishing to speak on non-agenda items? I do not see anyone in person. And I do not see anyone online. It's playing the OK button. Got it. Okay, Ms. Liu.
Hi, that's strange. This is the second time you guys missed me. I don't know what's happening, but I raised my hand because I wanted to make comment at the last topic, and you missed me, and then you missed me again. So I was wondering if I can make comment that I didn't get a chance to because you missed my hand raise. Um, so can I make a comment on that?
Please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm looking at the data. Thank you for the presentation. Looking at the data and I see FTE, but I don't see expand tied to FTE. So FTE alone, either for staffs or for student, doesn't tell the whole picture because you can have like 10 people that make $10 an hour, or you can have, 5 people that make $100 an hour, and that's like hugely difference in expense. So I was wondering, is it possible when you present data, whether percentage or or FTE, tie expense to it? Because at the end of the day, we want to know how much money is affected, like how much cash do we have to operate. So I would like to see that. Another thing I surprised that this was not brought up in the option was preschool. We are a TK to A district, and our main mission is serving elementary school students. Preschool is nice to have, but preschool is a few $1,000,000 as well. So I'm surprised to see that preschool isn't brought up in this. I understand that we got the Golden Bell, we got all those things, but there's expense incurred to it. And if these expenses are taken away from our main mission of serving what we're supposed to serve, which is just elementary students, elementary students, then why are we doing preschool, especially when the city already have their own program of preschool? So if there's any way we can collaborate with the city and have them take over that portion or figure that out, take that piece of expense off of our expense so that we can serve our elementary school population. I mean, not elementary, the TK to A. That's great. And also I like the option of TK half day, because then that will that will also cut down expense. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Liu. Any other speakers online? I do not see any. Okay, we'll move on to board updates. Any board update? Trustee Conley?
Yes, I'm happy to share that the symposium on supporting unhoused students that I co-organized was incredible this weekend. Priscilla Bogdanek, who is one of our McKinney-Vento coordinators, was on one of the panels, but we looked at big data across the county. We spoke with direct service providers working directly with students and families. And then we also looked at a case study, and it was very well attended. There were over 50 people there. It's the first time we've put on this symposium. And so that was our goal, was to get at least 50. I did learn something unique. So our new county superintendent, Dr. Tostin, he actually at one point during his education journey experienced being unhoused, and spoke very movingly to how that impacts children, and the more that we can learn directly from children and families going through what might be possibly the hardest experience of their lives, and how we can support them, that's very important. And then I am so excited that we're all going to the annual education conference the week after Thanksgiving. You should have received an email from Bonnie Mace, the Executive Director of the Santa Clara County School Boards Association, that had a message from me about the delegate assembly that will be held and the policy pillars that will be discussed there, asking for your input. I know everyone's busy, but the California School Boards Association uses these 4 policy pillars to guide its work and also the stances that it takes on legislation. So when we see CSBA take an oppose, a support, co-author, or get out of the way of a bill, this is where that comes from, those 4 policy pillars. And delegate assembly is made up of trustees who've been elected by their regions from across the state to go and represent their community. We have 8 delegates who are elected from our region, Santa Clara County, which is Region 20. And then we have one appointed for the County Office of Education. And those delegates want to know your opinion on these issues. And they will be going into discussions where their input is used kind of as a think tank for CSBA on how can we, what should we be researching? What should we be paying attention to? How can we inform our approach on these issues? So if you have a chance to fill that out, that would be wonderful. And it will be shared with all of our delegates. And beyond that, I really appreciate that our board is going. I think it's going to be a very informative experience. And I also look forward to hopefully having a report out when we get back of some sort. So we can share as a group what we learned while we were there.
Any other updates? Okay, next item, item 11. Are there any items for future agendas? Any member of the public wish to speak on this item?
I was just
Like, Trustee Henry?
I was just going to ask, since the next meeting is our only meeting in December, I remember that last year in advance, that's our organizational meeting, and in advance we submitted kind of preferences on committees and things like that. And I was wondering if you're going to be asking us for those things again this year.
I don't see any member of the public wish to speak on future agenda items. Don't see anyone. Board meeting dates. Our next board meeting date is in December 18th, 2025. And then we have two in January, on January 15th and January 29th, 2026.
And just putting in a reminder, I'd asked you to keep an eye on that first week of January because I expect a report to be ready from Renda. So we'll probably want to meet that week.
Good. Any further comments from the board? That will close the board meeting at 9:44.